Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving into Best Sex Writing 2009.
Oh, yeah,
You brought this collection to us,
I did.
and we're ready to unpack it.
Sounds good.
Our mission is to extract the most compelling insights, the surprising facts, and the thought-provoking perspectives,
Okay.
all found within these pages. And this isn't about, cheap thrills. This is about understanding the diverse and sometimes contradictory ways that we as humans think about and experience sex.
Right.
We'll be exploring topics ranging from personal fantasies and relationship dynamics to societal attitudes and even legal complexities, all drawn directly from these sources.
Okay, let's unpack this.
All right, sounds good.
So this book is a compilation of articles and essays, and they were originally published in various outlets like online and in print.
Yeah.
And these include pieces from Vice Magazine, Nerve.com, Marie Claire, Sex for America, Politically Inspired Erotica, Lust Bites blog, MSNBC.com, Over the Hill and Between the Sheets.
Wow, what a range. sfgate.com, San Diego City Beat, AVN Online, Salon.com, Sex in Crisis, The New Sexual Revolution and the Future of American Politics, Penthouse Forum, Playboy, Things I've Learned from Women Who've Dumped Me, Dirty Words, A Literary Encyclopedia of Sex, Love and Sex with Robots, Newsweek.com, Riverfront Times, Yale Law Journal, Pocket Part, DebbieandNathan.com, and Bonk, The Curious Coupling of Science and Sex.
So, like you said, quite a range.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. The foreword is by Brian Alexander, and the introduction is by Rachel Kramer Bussel.
Got it.
Now, Bussel notes that the collection aims to open minds and encourage thought about sexuality, including our own, our neighbors, politicians, and friends.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's good.
For you, the learner, we want to highlight the unexpected connections and the diverse viewpoints that are presented. In this snapshot of sexual discourse from 2009, we'll touch on how personal experiences intersect with broader cultural trends, and we'll aim to spark those aha moments you appreciate, all while respecting your time and avoiding information overload.
I like it.
Just consider, for instance, the range of topics, from one person's exploration of rape fantasy to the rise of dating websites for people with STIs, and even a father's role in his daughter's premarital virginity.
Wow.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm ready.
So, let's dive into personal explorations and fantasies.
Okay.
Tracy Egan's essay, One Rape, Please, to Go, details her exploration of a rape fantasy and her attempt to hire someone to fulfill it.
Whoa.
Note her internal conflict as a feminist, her criteria for selecting someone, like attractiveness, the ski mask idea, and the eventual shift to a date rape scenario. Her experience highlights this complex negotiation of control and desire.
Very interesting.
It is, right. And then we have Christina Lloyd's The Pleasure of Unpleasure, discusses her erotic fiction, which often involves themes of humiliation and degradation. She pushes back against the idea that erotic fiction must focus solely on conventional pleasure and challenges the misunderstanding and marginalization of erotic humiliation. She emphasizes the sense of liberation and freedom from self that can be found in such fantasies and experiences.
Interesting.
So what strikes you most about Tracy Egan's account?
Well, for me, I think the most striking thing is the raw honesty.
Yeah.
Especially as she identifies as a feminist.
Right.
You know, she's wrestling with this desire. That, on the surface, seems to contradict, conventional feminist ideals.
Right.
And the specifics she outlines are so interesting.
Yeah.
Like the attractiveness of the person, the detail about wanting the ski mask, but the firm boundary against a weapon.
Yeah.
It all kind of paints this incredibly complex picture of control within a fantasy of losing control.
Right.
And then the shift to a negotiated date rape scenario in a bar.
Yeah.
It really makes you reconsider the power dynamics at play in even our most private desires.
Yeah. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, I think what's really insightful here is how Egan's exploration challenges that kind of simplistic notion of victimhood and highlights the really complex ways in which individuals, even within a feminist framework, can grapple with these power dynamics and control in their fantasies.
Right.
She explicitly states, feeling like she's always in control in her real-life sexual encounters, leading her to wonder if this fantasy is like a subconscious attempt to experience, the opposite, or attempt to actually hire someone, while ultimately not realized in that initial form.
Right.
Underscores this desire to relinquish control.
Yeah.
But on her own terms, maintaining agency even in this imagined act of submission, the evolution to the date rape scenario, while still in the realm of fantasy, introduces another layer of negotiation and consent, even in a situation that, on the surface, seems to lack it.
Yeah. So Christina Lloyd in The Pleasure of Unpleasure, she's discussing her erotic fiction, which often features themes of humiliation and degradation. And she really pushes back on this knee-jerk reaction that erotic fiction has to be all about vanilla pleasure.
Right.
What do you see there?
Well, I think Lloyd confronts this frequent misunderstanding and marginalization of erotic humiliation.
Right.
She points out this societal tendency to pathologize desires that fall outside the traditionally accepted spectrum of pleasure.
Yeah.
She emphasizes that for her and her characters. Exploring themes of degradation isn't rooted in self-hatred or trauma, but rather in a very specific type of sexual experience that can unlock this sense of liberation and freedom from the constraints of the everyday self.
Almost like shedding that ego allows for a different kind of pleasure to surface.
Exactly.
She even uses the term subspace to describe that feeling of egoless relief.
Interesting.
It makes you question those very narrow definitions we often have of what constitutes pleasure in a sexual context.
Right, exactly.
What else do you see there?
Well, I think she also critiques this assumption that female erotica should inherently be softer or more romantic, and firmly rejects any implication that a woman who desires domination or submission must somehow be psychologically damaged. She very clearly frames these desires as, a sex thing.
Right.
Distinct from any underlying dysfunction or lack of self-worth. And I think she also touches on this tension within the sex positivity movement, suggesting that its overall message is valuable. It can sometimes feel overly prescriptive, not leaving enough space for the kind of messiness and even the angst that can accompany exploring these less conventional desires.
Really interesting. So moving into relationships and societal attitudes. Lynn Harris's piece, Searching for Normal, do dating websites for people with STIs liberate or quarantine? Really stands out. It examines this phenomenon of dating websites, specifically created for individuals with sexually transmitted infections. Why were these sites emerging in 2009?
I think that's a great question. Harris explores, the core motivations. And a major one is this desire to avoid that often awkward and sometimes painful process of disclosing an STI to a potential partner.
Right.
So these sites aim to create a space where that disclosure isn't necessary because everyone there shares a similar experience. It's about finding community built on this mutual understanding and acceptance where that aspect of their health isn't a source of stigma or potential rejection.
Right.
Platforms like positivesingles.com and mpwh.com or Meet People with Herpes sought to fulfill this need.
It's interesting, though, because as the piece points out, it's not a straightforward win. There's this inherent tension. The very act of creating these separate spaces could inadvertently reinforce the stigma that these individuals are trying to escape.
Right.
You have users expressing relief at not having to disclose, but then there's also the reality of a potentially smaller dating pool and this underlying societal judgment that still exists outside of these online communities.
Yeah, absolutely.
What did you think about that?
Well, I think what's really fascinating here is the contradiction that Harris uncovers. Even within these communities, you sometimes find individuals who, while living with an STI themselves, still express negative attitudes towards others with different or even the same STIs.
Oh, wow.
This really highlights how deeply ingrained societal stigma can be and how it can even be internalized within affected groups.
Right.
The article also brings in perspectives from medical professionals and the founders of these websites, offering this more comprehensive picture of the complexities at play. Terry Warren, a medical advisor for mpwh.com, suggests that these sites could be particularly valuable for those newly diagnosed, providing a safe space to build confidence
and connect with others before potentially venturing back into that broader dating scene.
I see. So beyond the practicalities of disclosure, what does the very existence of these platforms tell us about? The evolving landscape of intimacy and the burden of managing health conditions in our social lives. I think that's a really interesting angle to consider.
Yeah. Then we have Amanda Robb's Father Knows Best, which profiles the Wilson family and their deep commitment to the purity ball movement. The essay really focuses on their daughter Lauren's decision to, as they described it, give her heart to her father, to safeguard for her future husband.
Wow.
What struck you most about this portrayal of the Wilson family?
Well, I think this essay offers a remarkably intimate glimpse into a world that operates under a very different set of values and beliefs about relationships and sexuality. Rob really meticulously details Lauren's upbringing in this deeply religious and conservative family, her close bond with her parents, and the profound emotional significance surrounding her courtship with Brett Black.
Right.
The emphasis on maintaining virginity until marriage is absolutely central to their worldview. And this giving of the heart ceremony serves as this powerful symbol of this commitment and her father's protective role. The piece includes excerpts from a letter that Lauren's father wrote to Brett, further underscoring the spiritual and protective responsibility that he feels.
I mean, it's such a stark contrast to many contemporary perspectives on young adulthood and romantic relationships. You see Lauren and Brett engaging in what they describe as an emotionally hot courtship, filled with intense conversations and deep connection, yet with this very firm and consciously maintained boundary around any form of physical intimacy. And the narrative follows them right up to their wedding night, where this immense expectation of mind-blowing sex after this prolonged waiting period is explicitly mentioned. It makes you think about the pressures they must have felt.
It really does.
Yeah.
And I think what Rob does really skillfully is she presents this perspective without judgment.
Yeah.
While also subtly weaving in her own contrasting observations.
Right.
She notes Lauren's life as a stay-at-home wife, dedicated to supporting Brett's aspirations, and gently raises questions about, this concept of personal freedom and autonomy within this framework. Lauren, however, articulates a very different understanding of freedom, seeing it as living within clearly defined boundaries. She used the analogy of, driving safely within marked lanes and obeying traffic signals.
Oh, wow.
And the conclusion where Rob and Lauren share this is seemingly universal, almost cliche, girly moment over makeup, yet harbors such fundamentally different underlying concerns and fears about each other's lives, is really poignant. It powerfully illustrates how these perceptions of subjugation and freedom can be deeply personal and heavily influenced by cultural context.
And then we have Unleash the Beast by Josephine Thomas, a pseudonym for a suburban mother who experiences this rekindling of her sexual desire through an affair with a man she meets at a train station. What does this essay tell us about desire within long-term relationships?
Well, I think this piece delves into the complexities that can develop within long-term marriages, particularly this feeling of invisibility or the fading of one's individual identity, especially for women. The affair, in this case, acts as a catalyst for this woman to reconnect with her own sexuality and sense of self, aspects that had seemingly become dormant within the routine of her marriage and family life.
What's interesting, though, is the impact this affair has on her marriage. Instead of leading to its immediate breakdown, it actually seems to spark improved communication and this renewed sense of intimacy with her husband. It's like this external spark somehow reignites something within their existing relationship.
Exactly. And the author reflects on this initial excitement and validation she experienced through the affair, the ego boost, and the rediscovery of her own sexual desires. However, she also grapples with the moral implications of her actions, acknowledging the conflict between, her emotions and her intellectual understanding of right and wrong. Ultimately, while the affair itself might be considered a transgression, the essay suggests that it served as this unexpected wake-up call, leading to a renewed appreciation and effort within her marriage.
Highlighting the often paradoxical outcomes of these experiences.
Now, shifting gears to the intersection of sex and technology. Violet Blue's Is Cybersex Cheating? Tackles this increasingly relevant question from 2009. What were the key arguments she presented?
Well, this essay grapples with these evolving definitions of infidelity in a digital age, where online sexual interactions are increasingly common. Blue very carefully distinguishes cybersex from the mere consumption of pornography. The crucial difference she highlights is the presence of another human being, on the other end of the interaction,
Right.
which introduces this layer of emotional complexity that isn't present
Right.
in solitary pornography use.
It's that element of real-time interaction,
Right.
that sense of connection, however virtual, that seems to blur the traditional lines of what constitutes infidelity.
She raises this fundamental question of how technology is fundamentally impacting the boundaries we establish in our relationships. Regarding intimacy and betrayal, where do we draw that digital line in the sand?
Exactly. And the essay doesn't offer a definitive yes or no answer, but rather opens up this crucial discussion, acknowledging that the emotional impact of a partner engaging in, explicit text exchanges or live cam sessions with someone else is likely to feel significantly different from them simply watching pornography.
Right.
It compels us to consider where, as individuals and as couples, we draw these boundaries in the ever-evolving digital landscape of our relationships.
Now, David Levy's Sex Dolls for the 21st Century takes us down a completely different technological path. It explores the increasing popularity and sophistication of sex dolls, particularly in Japan. What were some of the key trends that he identified?
Well, this article traces the evolution of sex dolls. From inflatable novelties to these increasingly lifelike silicone figures. Levy highlights these advancements in manufacturing and the changing societal attitudes towards these dolls. Initially viewed as purely instruments for physical release, they've begun to be regarded by some owners as objects of affection and even companionship.
It's quite a transformation in perception.
It is.
Yeah. You see this reflected in practices like the Buddhist memorial service, the kuyo, held for discarded dolls, which suggests a level of emotional attachment beyond mere objectification. And then you have the emergence of rental services like Doll No Mori, catering to a surprisingly diverse clientele, not just the demographic one might stereotypically expect.
Right, exactly. The article quotes the manager of Doll No Mori, noting that their primary clientele wasn't the stereotypical lonely geek, but rather ordinary salarymen in their 30s and 40s. This suggests a broader appeal and perhaps reflects a shifting social landscape where some individuals find it easier to explore intimacy or companionship through these artificial means rather than navigating the complexities of human relationships.
It is interesting the article also touches on the potential implications for the human sex work industry, with some speculating that these sophisticated dolls could pose a significant economic challenge. Keegan Hamilton's Oldest Profession 2.0 brings us back to the internet, but this time focusing on the online community, STLASP, or St. Louis Adult Service Providers, a forum for sex workers and their clients. What does this online space reveal about the realities of sex work in the digital age?
Well, this piece offers a fascinating look at how the internet has provided new avenues for sex workers to connect with each other and with potential clients. STLASP functions as this virtual community where providers can share crucial information regarding safety, discuss client experiences, and build a sense of solidarity that might be lacking in more traditional, isolated forms of sex work. Clients, often referred to as hobbyists within the forum, also participate by posting reviews of their encounters.
It sounds like a virtual red light district. But with this added layer of community support and information sharing, it suggests a potential increase in safety and agency for sex workers compared to pre-internet models.
Absolutely. The creator of the site, known as MAC, emphasizes her primary intention of educating women in the industry and fostering a safer environment for them to connect and exchange knowledge, including warnings about potentially dangerous clients. Client review system also introduces a degree of accountability. However, the piece also touches on the persistent societal stigma surrounding sex work and the inherent risks involved, as well as the desire among some community members to maintain their privacy and avoid judgment from those outside the forum. The moderator, using the handle Lives to Wit, eloquently captures this tension, noting the sense of belonging within the community. But juxtaposed with this fear of external judgment, the comparison of Craigslist to training wheels for the sex industry is also quite insightful, highlighting the lack of formal resources and support for individuals entering this field.
Now let's navigate the complex intersection of sex, law, and politics. Kelly Davis's Sex Offenders examines public perception and the legal treatment of sex offenders with a specific focus on the implementation of Jessica's Law and similar ordinances in San Diego. What were the key findings regarding the effectiveness of these laws?
Well, this article highlights a significant disparity between this widespread public fear surrounding sex offenders and the actual empirical research on recidivism rates. Davis points out how laws like Jessica's Law, which often establish these predator-free zones around schools and parks and mandate GPS tracking for certain offenders, are frequently driven more by emotional responses to these high-profile cases, like the abduction of Jessica Lunsford.